Now, most sports games are pretty trash. They're uninspired at best and downright awful at worst, with such classics as FIFA 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Alright, this one doesn't count. But you know what isn't trash? Anime.
No.
Now, it's obvious to anyone with a brain that anime is the reason everything good in the world exists, and the world of football is no exception. This epiphany led a 13-year-old me to discover Inazuma 11. 2. And on the surface, it just seems like a pretty standard RPG based around football. But as fun as the game is, I want to put it aside for now, because after beating it, I quickly discovered that it had an anime adaptation. And as far as animated football content goes, it was either this or fucking Galactic Football, and you know I wasn't watching Galactic Football, alright?
Not this time, Warren.
What an amazing tackle!
Since the anime was adapted from the whole game series, this gave me a chance to start the story from the very beginning, since I'd started with the sequel instead of the first game. And although the tone isn't unlike most other sports anime, it sets itself apart. Because a lot of sports anime like to use real-world skills and accuracy to inspire the abilities of the players. This show doesn't do that. This show is completely insane. If Haikyuu is on the accurate, sort of tame side of the scale, and Kuroko Basket's like here, oh no. In the context of the show, this ball-buster shit is just referred to as special moves or techniques, and they're one of the main reasons I keep coming back to this shit. There is an endless number of these, and while some of them can be kinda bad, most of them really are sick to look at. The camera angles are dynamic and the animation makes them feel weighty and powerful. And even when they're not going for raw strength, a lot of these techniques are super creative and usually serve to fit the particular player who's using them, whether that be through their position or through their character. Although there are a few techniques that aren't specific to one character, the vast majority of them are usually tied to one player in particular. With that in mind, these techniques allow each character to feel distinct, as their techniques are an extension of themselves. So even less developed characters can have moves that are completely unique to them. And in a sports anime with 11 plus characters on every team, this small but distinct diversity in the majority of the characters is definitely a plus. One of my favourite examples of this is the Brazilian national team who, much like real life, prefer to use all this stylish bullshit over physical strength, and it makes them so instantly likeable. Like, look at this shit. And these may seem like small little details, but the fact that these details are so considered is what makes these characters feel authentic and believable. For context, there's 4 types of techniques you can use, those being goalkeeping, defensive, dribbling, and shooting. And contrary to real world football, where the majority of the time you only really give a shit about the strikers, you know, the people scoring the goals, in Inazuma 11, every position is presented to be just as cool as each other, because all this whack football magic bullshit isn't just reserved for the strikers. I mean, the protagonist is a goalkeeper of all things. Like, this show made me think being a goalkeeper was this super tense, super cool position just through how much these techniques sell that idea to you. So much so that my favourite moments in the show are primarily when a shooting technique clashes with a goalkeeping technique. Since this keeper versus striker dynamic is the difference between scoring and not scoring, these situations already carry a lot of tension in real world football. But this show just goes fucking wild with that shit, making the shots less like this and more like and in general, some of these techniques are fucking brutal, especially a few that weren't featured in the anime. And I know the visuals here aren't 10 out of 10, but keep in mind, this is a 2008 DS game with full 3D animations for 300 plus techniques. Come on, you gotta give it up for Inazuma 11. Although I really appreciate how faithfully the anime adapted these moves, you know, taking a lot of care to capture what made them so good in the first place, there's still an itch that the DS animations really scratch, primarily through the more punchy sound design and tighter animation. you hear that crunch, you hear that. The names of these techniques are also a joy. We got Meteor Blade, we got Death Zone, we got the Phoenix, we got Emperor Penguin number 1, Emperor Penguin number 2, Emperor Penguin number 3, Emperor Penguin X, and what is that, Space Penguin? What the fuck is Space Penguin? Oh yeah, okay. And I understand that without context, this shit does look whack as fuck, but it doesn't get much better with context, to be honest. A lot of the show is style over substance, but there are plenty of cases where that's 100% okay. Like, I don't watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for the tight writing and super considered character depth. You know, as long as I see some ghosts punching each other and, you know, a little sunlight karate sprinkled in there, I'm for it. But despite that, there are definitely elements of JoJo's that are super considered and really impressive, especially with the character design. So instead of tearing that show down for its faults, the positives are so well executed that those negatives just fall away in what a unique and entertaining experience the show is. And I feel much the same way about Inazuma 11. The best praise I can give it is that it has a lot of heart. And that term is super vague, but the way I see it is that it feels like something the creators enjoyed making and really believed in. Even in concept, it seems like this really cool love letter to Captain Tsubasa, which is already known for its ridiculously dramatic shit. But while I have a lot of respect for Captain Tsubasa, especially for the art style, to me it feels like Captain Tsubasa walked so Inazuma 11 could run. Like, when you see this, you know, that's pretty cool, that's pretty neat. But come on, let's be real. You want this one. You want this one. This show is also very open about its respect for what inspired it, from techniques that reference Captain Tsubasa directly, to even specific character designs being inspired by Captain Tsubasa's art style. Speaking of character design... Alright, I'm gonna do a little experiment here just to test the water. Of these characters, try to guess which one is a defender and which one is a striker. If you guessed that this is a defender and that this is a striker, you'd be right, and I'm confident that a lot of you were, because the character designs do such a good job of conveying a lot while being very simplistic. Jack's large, imposing frame gives the impression of an immovable wall, an aspect that would benefit someone defending a goal from a striker. Likewise, Axel's sharp hair and thin body type make him seem agile and highly skilled, traits that would heavily benefit a more offensive position. The reason this works is down to the fundamental shapes that make up their designs. Since every character in this show is going to be wearing a team uniform the majority of the time, the character designs have to work on a more fundamental level, relying heavily on how the body type and hair of each character complements their personality. And for the most part, it does this really well. But since the show has a shit ton of characters, you're gonna have a number of them that just look fucking stupid. Like, holy shit, what the fuck happened to you, stupid? But since these nightmarish beings aren't very common, it doesn't bother me really. Except when it does. Jesus Christ, what even is that? Overall, the special moves and the characters are a huge appeal of the show for me, but there's another thing. And it's the fucking soundtrack, holy shit. Every song I've used in this video is from Inazuma 11. The music from the games was remixed for the anime, and overall, they both sound fantastic. Most of the teams even have their own specific theme music, and it does so much to sell their personality. Like, I can just put these themes over the footage of the corresponding team, and you can so easily gauge what kind of team they are. Jesus, that's some Dark Souls shit. And this care isn't exclusive to these themes, because the rest of the soundtrack is some divine shit. Like, humanity doesn't deserve a soundtrack this good. It makes Persona 5 look like... Actually, nah, the Persona 5's got a really, really good sound. If it wants to be upbeat and get all jazzy, it'll do that. And if it wants you to just relax, you know, just hang out with the characters, hey, it does that too. But then there's times where the music just steals the show and says, alright, Time for the best shit you've ever heard in your entire fucking life. Alright, I'm done with the music now, and I bet you're wondering, well, this music and presentation is all well and good, but what's the show actually about? And if you guessed football, well, holy fuck, do you want a medal? Despite how much I love the presentation and how cool looking all this stuff is, it is worth looking at how much investment I have in the story. And don't worry, I'm mature enough to leave my emotions at the door and judge this story purely on its merits, free from the eyes of rose-tinted nostalgia, so here's my unbiased breakdown of Inazuma 11's story. If I'm honest, the story is really basic, but executes well on a lot of what it does. The anime is split into 3 seasons, with each season covering the storyline of one of the 3 games. Makes sense. The first season is an underdog story to win the national championship, and fun fact, this is actually the first sports anime to have an underdog story ever, so yeah, that's pretty. The second season covers the threat of an alien race who are destroying the schools of those who fail to beat them in a football match, and the third season covers the challenge to the World Championships. I can't help but feel like one of these isn't like the others. Yeah, the quote-unquote aliens are just revealed to be artificially enhanced humans, you'll be relieved to know. Although a small part of me wishes they were just aliens, you know, I fuck with that. But rather than cover each season individually and critique them and shit, I think the show's biggest strength lies in the characters and how the relationships and dynamics between characters gradually evolve. At first the club only has a few members, not even enough to call themselves a team, but over time as the protagonist, Mark, draws in more members with his genuine love for football, you get to know these characters really well, not only on a person-to-person basis, like Jack's incredibly sensitive personality despite his intimidating frame, but the members of the team also form these really genuine, developed relationships. A favourite of mine being the dynamic between Kevin and Axel. While the rest of the initial team sit around lazily, Kevin really wants to train just like Mark does because he sees himself as the ace of the team. But when Axel, a highly skilled transfer student, joins the team and proves to be an invaluable member, Kevin begins to feel more and more useless. Being one of the first ever members of the team, Kevin's pride feels attacked by Axel's undeniable competence. While Axel has a stunning signature technique of his own, Kevin does not, and so in an attempt to close the gap between the two, Kevin trains with Mark to create his own technique so that he can be the one the team relies on. After completing his own technique and proving to himself that he's a valuable member of the team, he realizes that everyone is, and that it isn't up to him or Axel alone to carry the team, because every single member has their own part to play in helping each other succeed. So to put this ethos into practice, Kevin and Axel create a technique that combines their strengths, creating a direct parallel between Kevin's emotional progression as well as the current ability of the team as a whole. And while this is just an isolated example, the consideration for characters and relationships is such a prevalent aspect of this show overall that makes it so worthwhile. Like how Nathan was willing to leave his athletics club due to Mark's sheer enthusiasm for football and finding out that he really loves it as well. And how tragic that sentiment becomes when Nathan's self-worth begins to plummet as the series progresses, seeing him become more and more disheartened as the team faces increasingly more powerful and often more terrifying opponents. To the point where he leaves the team after seeing one of his fellow teammates being severely injured. And you might be thinking, come on, it's just football, I mean, how scary could it be? And while the writing and storytelling isn't particularly innovative, I feel the characters are well defined and believable enough to care about. To add to this, the show does not shy away from making the main characters lose, and there are a number of occasions where they lose bad. And it grounds these characters so well because while underdog stories in which the main characters overcome everything all the time is a cool power fantasy to get lost in, seeing these characters who weren't far off my age at the time lose in such definitive, brutal ways made them feel far more familiar and relatable. Being a teenager and dealing with the feelings of inferiority and inadequacy that adolescence can bring, it was refreshing to see the characters I loved watching also suffer in such mundane but human ways. It made them feel like real people that I could relate to and learn from. And it made the moments where they do win and do succeed feel infinitely more earned and satisfying. When they won a match or when a character turned the corner mentally, it felt so real and tangible. And so when I saw them do amazing things while also suffering through the same things as me, it made me feel like I could do the same. And I think that's fucking rad. Alright, enough baby shit. Real quick, I want to talk about the localization. Now, the anime's Japanese dub is actually pretty good. The voice actors bring their A game, especially the protagonist, which makes sense because it's the same guy who voices Naruto in the original dub. But I didn't start with the anime. I started with the game. In English. And I don't know what deal with the devil was made that led to this, but
Surely we don't stand a chance against them.
I think it speaks for itself. Yeah, they decided to make an English, like UK English dub for the Western localization, and it sounds different.
Well done, Darren.
Featuring veterans of the voice acting industry like Lizzie Waterworth, aka Horrid Henry. Then again, that show is just an anime in disguise, so what do I know? Yeah, this dub is it sure is something else. What baffles me most is that the characters have distinct, like, specific accents from specific areas of the UK, yet the story canonically takes place in Japan? So it creates this really jarring but infinitely entertaining experience.
It's hard to believe, but it seems we've been attacked by a football team from outer space.
To top it all off, the accents aren't even convincing. It sounds like English people doing an impression of themselves. It's stupid, it's hilarious, and I have no idea why it exists.
Football.
The reason I got thinking about Inazuma 11 at all, at least recently, is mainly because I found out that the original series got a follow-up series called Inazuma 11 Go. And so naturally I watched it, and it was strange. It follows a new protagonist years after the ending of the original series, and it had a lot of the same charm. But the thing that kept me coming back the most was that the previous main characters were also featured, and they had aged a few years. And it was such a surreal experience seeing these characters I grew up with grow up. And although the show wasn't as good as the original in my eyes, there were definitely times where I felt the same way as I did when I first discovered the original series. And in fairness to the show, there's some really good fan service and callbacks to the previous series that admittedly got a few tears out of me here and there. If nothing else, seeing this follow-up series definitely made me appreciate the original much more, and made me realise just how much it influenced me when I first watched it. And as hard as I'd find it to recommend 100 plus episodes of anything, if anything I've said has piqued your interest in the show or the games, give them a shot. The original Inazuma 11 games are actually really solid RPGs, apart from the divisive voice acting.
I got you there.
Inazuma 11, intentionally or not, taught me a lot of valuable things. Not only was it some much needed escapism, but to me it's also one of the most stylish and energetic pieces of media out there. Or it's just a silly show about football magic, I don't know.